Hey, I want to welcome you guys back to another episode of the AWM NFL Players Podcast. My name is Riccardo Stewart, and I have the opportunity to be your host, and I'm joined with my friends and my coworkers. Let's start first. I got Sam Acho. He's the mayor, gets everybody's vote. We got Jeff Locke. He's a professor, primarily because he educates and he drops knowledge. And then lastly, got Zach Miller, the truth, because everything he says, solid. And so guys, good to be back on the podcast. And I know we got a chance to be with each other in the same room this past week, traveling. And now we get to talk about some of the things that questions that come up quite a bit. It's always amazing to me that we work with NFL athletes who've made millions. And some of the questions that we may think are simple are the same questions that they're asking. And so for today's podcast episode, I really want to talk about investing. I want to talk about investing from like a 30,000 feet. And what I mean by that is everyone wants to see their money grow, and people know that they go to an advisor to talk about investing, but many of them have no idea on what is it, where do I go, and then how do I invest? And not necessarily particulars, but just from a broad deal. And so I'll start us off first. I got this definition of, what is investing? I'm going to read it here. It says the act of committing money or capital to an endeavor with the expectation of obtaining additional income or profit. And one of the things we say is it's not so much just about the percentage or the return, but even more so what matters most is after-tax dollars, meaning what happens once it's taxed. And so I'm going to step back and we're going to talk more about, what does that look like from just a higher level? So I'm going to start first with you, Sam. How do I invest?
Well, so there's really two ways to invest, right? We're talking about this 30,000 foot view of investing. One way is to own a piece of a company. It's called equity. So you can invest in a company like Apple, own Apple stock. And if the value of Apple, the company Apple makes iPhones and MacBooks, if their value grows, well, all of a sudden, because you own a piece of their company, well, now the money you invested grows as well. And so that's one way to invest, equity, ownership. There's another way to invest, though, and that other way is called, essentially, it's like you lend money to companies, right? And so that's, people call them bonds. Okay, I'm gonna lend money to the government. I'm gonna lend money to my local municipality. I'm gonna lend money, and then they're going to pay me back. And so, no, I don't own any of that money that I lent, but I'm gonna get paid back with interest. And so, the two simple ways to think about investing are, one is equity, right? Ownership. Think about different companies, right? Own a piece of a company. The other way is essentially you're lending your money to people, to companies, and then they pay you back.
I like that. And I'm probably more likely to lend to the government because I know I've lent my money to some people before. I don't trust them to pay me back. So that's perfect. That's good. How? Ownership and being able to lend, stocks and bonds. Okay. Professor, why don't you step back and, I understand I can buy stock and have ownership. I can buy bonds where I'm lending my money, particularly to a government or a municipality, as Sam said. But where do I go to buy these investments?
The easiest way to think about it, 30,000 feet, is there's two places to buy, right? You've got the public markets and you've got the private markets when you want to buy. Public markets, Sam just talked about Apple. They're one of the biggest companies out there at the moment, right? You can go on your computer, literally within 5 minutes, you can make an account and you could actually go buy Apple stock, right? That's the public market, easily accessible. Same thing with bonds. At one point, Apple used to issue bonds where they needed loans. You could buy their loans, give them money, and then they pay you back with interest. Again, you can go and do that on the public market. Then the private market, think of when Apple was just coming out of their garage, right? If you all know the story. Right, for a number of years before Apple became public and traded on the public market, they were on the private market. Right? And the private market's different. You can't just log into an app or go on the computer and buy those companies. You have to have access. The reason is they're more risky and they're younger companies, right? So public versus private is really the high level way to think about where to get these investments.
It's perfect. All right. I know how, right? Stocks or bonds. I know where, public or private. Zach, tell me the truth. No pun intended. how do I mean, like, in sense, like, what do I even invest in?
Well, first and foremost, for any athlete, invest in your human capital. We talk about it a lot. The most money you will ever make is going to be in your performance on that field, on the football field. You can generate way more returns. Like everyone wants to talk about returns in the stock market, returns on those bonds we just talked about. But the biggest return is going to be investing in your human capital, specifically that physical capital. How good of a player can you be that short window that you have to play in the NFL? And then you make that money. Then you can look at, okay, I'm so concentrated in my own athletic ability and ability to perform on the field. Let me be diversified when I go to a globally diversified mix of stocks, bonds across the whole globe in those thousands of companies that exist in the world. They're able to invest in the world. You can be diversified there. So spreading around essentially your investments will result in more money and a better outcome of kind of that risk of that personal to that diversified mix of public, companies, private companies all across the globe.
All right. So if I'm hearing you guys, first and foremost, Sam, thank you. I can have ownership, buy stock. I can lend, get a bond. I need to go purchase these things in the public market where all the information is there. Or if I have the access, I can go to the private market, but a little bit more risky. And if I am going to invest, Zach, I got to invest first in myself, my physical, intellectual, and social human capital. And then when I invest in the market, I want to make sure that I'm diversified is the word that you heard us use. So before we leave, I'm going to ask you guys a few things so you guys can drop a little bit more wisdom. Jeff, what are 2 questions I should be asking myself before I begin investing?
The first question, we've talked about bonds and stocks, right? They're different. Is, do I have enough in bonds before I invest in stocks? Right, we'll talk about it in future episodes of like why that's so important, is building what we call your safety before you start putting out your risk, right? So that's the first question. Bonds before stocks, do I have enough? Second is, am I willing to let my stocks grow for decades? Not years, not like 5 years, but decades. And that's what's required to actually get the returns that you want in the future.
It's good. Zach, because you always talk about, the superpower of investing is when you're young and starting when you're young. Why is it so important to begin investing as young as I possibly can?
Well, there's a lot of things you can't control in investing. Sometimes those market returns, the returns you get, a lot of that is left to somewhat a little bit of chance. Whereas if you start earlier, your money gets to compound, and the power of compounding is massive when you start at 20 versus then you start at 30. The amount of money that will grow and be able to compound for years and years and years, it truly is the superpower. Anytime you have the opportunity to invest early, you'll end up with way more money than if you invest later in life. And so getting started as quickly and early as possible, putting that money into things that grow makes, something that could be 100,000 turn into millions that much quicker.
All right, Mayor, I want you to wrap it up for us. Why is it important when thinking of my future self and my future family to invest?
The reason it's important, especially now when you're young, to invest is that the future you, right? Let's say you're 22, 21, 20. The 35-year-old you is going to thank you for the investments that you made right now. Meaning, let's say you do play an illustrious career and let's say you do a good job. Well, fast forward, you may not be making that same income when you're 30 and 40 and 50. If you invest in the right way, all of a sudden the decisions you made at 22, 25, maybe right now you are 35 and you're listening to this podcast. The decisions you make right now, all of a sudden the future you will thank you, because all of a sudden, let's say you're getting some of these interest payments back that you're not working for. Let's say you've invested into a company and all of a sudden that company is growing. They're paying you dividends. All of a sudden it's like, wow, this is positive. Rather than making some of the wrong decisions and saying, okay, I'm only going to invest in the private market. I'm going to risk, do all this risk. I got a buddy who has this deal. I'm going to put all my money there. That may not be the best decision. And so I think there's an idea of being prudent and thinking about your future self and saying, okay, I'm going to invest now with wisdom and with tact so that in the future, I don't have to worry about how am I going to take care of my family? Put it that way.
Love it. How do I invest? You invest into stocks and bonds. Where do I go? Well, you go to the public or the private. And how? Into yourself first, and then globally diversified. If you have any questions on what we've said, or you want more resources to learn more about investing, please reach out to us. You can send us a text at 602-989-5022.